Hi, I'm Elise Tan, and I'm your host for this episode of Hard Truth by Vertex Podcast. Today, I'm in the company of two thought leaders in the area of climate tech. I'm pleased to have Natalia Rialucky, founder of FairAtmos, as well as my colleague and partner in investment, Puiyan Leung. Puiyan also led the round for FairAtmos. Hi, Ria. Hi, Puiyan.
Hi, Elise. How are you? Hi,
Good.
Brienne.
Yeah, thanks for taking time for this show. So, we are also celebrating International Women's Day with this podcast. We are going to have a three-way conversation talking about climate, life, family, and work. So, first of all, let me introduce Ria. So, I mentioned that Ria founded FairAtmos. She brings with her more than 10 years of experience leading projects in the area of sustainability across agriculture and climate. Wow, you must know a lot in climate.
Thanks, Elise. I mean, I'm learning every day, and I guess learning with Puyan makes it much more fun. I'm also a mom of two. I
That's
mean,
right.
three if you count my husband too as well. So, and four with the startup. So I'm very privileged with all the love that I get.
Puyen and myself are mothers as well. So I have a young daughter, and then for Puyen, she has two. So why don't you tell us more about Fair Atmos?
Actually, Mimi, let's go from the start. It was 2 years ago when I was actually, my job was onboarding farmers to use a digital platform, right? When most of the farmers there really complains about, the failure in crops harvest because of weather extremities. When it was supposed to rain, it didn't rain. When it didn't supposed to rain, it rained really hard. They don't say it, but it's apparent for me that it's really, really the impact of climate change. And they're very vulnerable. They don't have any resources to adapt, to mitigate, or prevent the future, right? And again, because it was early 2020, 21, right? All the talks about climate funds, the world is putting more than 600 billion to really combat and do climate action, right? I felt like there's a big discrepancies where all of these resources, I felt did not really got received to the ground, right, to the communities and the smallholders who really need to adapt and help mitigate. Because to be honest with you, agriculture also produce a lot of greenhouse gases that causes climate change in the first place as well, right? So these kind of discrepancies really create a big question for me. How can we bridge this? And what is also the role of technology? Because I really enjoy my experience in running startups and running technology companies, right? We have gone so far with what we can do with technology. So that's the entire thesis of FairAtmos. How do you use technology to make a market, a climate carbon market that is inclusive for everyone? So together with Puyan, actually, a lot of the ideation that we do to build FairAtmos really comes from talking a lot of people, a lot of climate experts as well in the space, right? Basically, we believe that FairAtmos plays the best role to become the carbon credit marketplace in order to connect communities, smallholders, asset owners, in order to create carbon absorbing projects connected to companies who would like to offset and finance such projects. We have been to almost a year running now with around 20 people. We have worked with over 60 organizations across Indonesia, foundations, NGOs, provincial governments, communities, companies who have more than 1.3 million hectares of forestry and lands, including mangroves in Indonesia. We're very proud that our platform really get a lot of traction because it seems like a lot of people want to get involved. So a lot of our technology really helped to speed up the certification, the verification of carbon projects. The intention is for us to grow much faster, much bigger together with Vertex and all of our partners as well.
It's definitely very exciting, and this is our very first climate tech investment. We are really excited to see how we can be, part of the solution towards achieving net zero. So I'm going to step back and ask both of you, how did our collaboration and all that comes about?
Actually, we were already known entities because we are used to work with one of our portfolio companies. But I think I didn't have the privilege of meeting her in person then. My Indonesia-based colleague Kush pings me when I was in the midst of my maternity leave and said that, hey, Ria is starting something new and it's going to be in the direction of climate. And actually, there was no agenda because at the time, I think you were maybe still just at the very early stage of your company formation, not much traction and maybe not even a business idea. So, but I was always open to a conversation. So we decided to sort of figure out a meeting. And it's just to get to know each other in the space because the space is young, the space is developing. I think we as an ecosystem can do with more support for each other, mutual support for each other, because everyone is still learning at the same time.
Tell me more about what happened first time both of you met.
I think the exciting part was not the first time when we met, but basically, if I can share a little bit like why I really want also to work with Puiyan. As how fundraising process goes, right? You basically meet different partners. I was actually 9 months pregnant when I was fundraising as well. And when I was talking to Puiyan as well, he just also had a baby, right? So I guess we sort of understood each other. That's why we really want to support each other as well.
I think that's the cool thing about Vertex Ventures. We have quite a high proportion of investors who are female, and we realize female founders can be successful, and this means that we need to surround ourselves with support network.
Yeah, I think maybe just to add on, talking about the first impression is that when I was about to deliver, I was already kind of not very level-headed. But when I look at Ria, she was level-headed as a founder, as a leader, right? As investor, it was our job also to try to stress test and ask questions in different direction. What are your different strategy when you're faced with different direction, especially when the whole space is still so fluid from a regulatory standpoint, from a market demand standpoint. And even at that point, I could see that Ria was still very level-headed in the way she was going to problem solve. So it was really impressive. I mean, obviously, we are a typical Series A investor, so this is a company that is slightly earlier than our sweet spot. But we still place a lot of emphasis on the founder profile, and this is a testament to that.
Yeah. And thanks for sharing all this. But I would want to say that I don't know whether we are good role models for women because we are working during maternity.
What is maternity?
Yeah. So, Puiyan, so how did we develop the thesis for making investment into climate tech and particularly into FairAtmos? Could you share?
Yeah, so actually it was a long journey, right? So I personally started being curious about the topic maybe in 2021. If you dial back 24 months up to 18 months ago, the whole space is just booming, but people were just throwing jargons into the market, ESG, sustainability, climate, and they mean similar but also different things. So I kind of took it upon myself to try to read into the space, to try to compartmentalize and organize my thoughts because I'm a bit geeky that way. It cannot be just a conceptual idea. I need to understand and have a good handle on the different concepts. And I kind of realized that in more advanced markets, so for example, US and Europe, when people think about climate, they would be talking about the next frontier technology. What is the carbon capture technology? A more efficient way to capture solar, whatever turbine. But when I examine our Southeast Asia ecosystem, our deep tech ecosystem is still sort of developing, right? Definitely much more nascent than other developed markets. So then the question for myself is there no role for us to play? And I realized that there would be, because we also have our unique set of challenges where US and European solutions will not be able to tackle. So therefore, it's so easy after I met Ria when she talked about her idea because it checked those boxes, right? She's tapping onto something that is naturally rich in our part of the world, biodiversity. She's leveraging a combination of a simple digital workflow tool plus her own proprietary IP to give access to the farmers, give them a way to access the global and regional carbon markets. If we can provide more transparency, traceability, credibility to the whole system, and I think FairAtmos is in a good position to do that, then there's a lot of opportunity that can be tapped upon. So it's nascent. I think there's a lot of work to be done, but the company is hopefully well positioned to make a real impact and also therefore capture some of these growing opportunity.
I think maybe it's good to also talk about the compulsory carbon markets, just to give an entire picture, how developed it has been, and then maybe sharing about the opportunity within the voluntary space and what FairAtmos is doing. So Ria, would you like to share more with us?
Yeah. So I guess in the overall context of carbon markets, yes, there are two types, right? One is the compliance market, where it's heavily regulated. Typically, governments already ask a certain sector to have a cap on how much they can emit. So in order to meet that cap, they can do either tax or trade, and the entire compliance market is to trade that allowance, right? Countries in Europe and the US are more mature in implementing such regulation already. Meanwhile, in Southeast Asia, the countries are just starting. Some of them, Malaysia, I think Singapore as well, is looking more into the voluntary, given there are still discussion on how we can actually also establish the compliance. Meanwhile, Indonesia itself is also starting to design the compliance regulation first before they actually want to set up the entire compliance market ecosystem, right? So this is where we think the voluntary market is. What kind of infrastructure needs to be there? How do we help the project developers to even create the project, right? How do we help the companies to actually discover good projects, and how do we help them to price what is a good carbon offset, right? That is both, reward, giving them economic incentive, but also really trickle down towards carbon absorption and impact, right? So this is the role what FairAtmos does. We see three main pain points. One, there is a very high technical barriers for the project developers, in this case, communities, smallholders, or asset owners who wants to get their project carbon credit certified. And certification is very important because we believe that the science needs to be proven, right? Second, they also have a high challenge on actually acquiring financing to really change their mode of practice, right? So, for example, farmers typically they just soak all their rice field with water. If we want to ask them to change to use water dripping, right, then who's going to finance it? And it's not going to be cheap, right? So these two pain points is what Atmos trying to solve by our first product, which is providing a free and fast eligibility check, right? So then for you smallholder farmers and for you communities who manage or do planting of a certain mangrove area, right? You can just upload a shapefile and we can tell you how much carbon stock is eligible there and whether you can be eligible for a carbon credit or not. Everything we do instantly. We do cut time from people who process it around 60 to 90 days to instantly right now. And we're also giving it for free, right? Because we know if we want more people to get involved, you need to make it very, very frictionless. So that's the first way we want to help have a thriving carbon market. And the second one is after the projects that are already eligible, we offer a lot of traditional financing options such as straight loans, equity, and we match them with funders who would like to do so. But we also help to figure out, design creative financing that is very Indonesia or very Southeast Asia specific, that is able to provide the cash upfront, mitigate the risk of the project, but also provide the payback to the funders or the buyers in form of carbon credit. So then the interest of the funders as well as the interest of the project owners is aligned, right? Where we are today is we already have very much advancement on financing and tech. How do we actually use this and design the right tools to really advance project developers into entering the carbon markets, but as well as also catering to the financiers and the buyers' needs as well, at least.
What is the hard truth about building this voluntary carbon markets, which is more nascent?
Yeah, from my perspective, as an investor, we are cognizant of certain risk in any investment that we make. The first would be the fact that the whole market is still nascent. I think the good thing is FairAtmos is definitely one of the early movers in the space, but it also means that Ria and her team carries the burden to open up the market, right? So whether it's talking to the farmers, educating the corporates or any other partners, this may be the first time they're exposed to the carbon credits market. So there may be some inherent inertia, right? But that is maybe the price that we have to pay, right, to becoming one of the first mover. And I guess the flip side is actually the market opportunity is very obvious, right? Because there's a vast amount of biodiversity in our region. So once the market is open up, there will be bound to be competition, right? It's not easy to do, but because the market is attractive, is large, is the size of the prize is huge, there will be distraction, there will be competition along the way. And I think we will have to rely on Ria and her management team to stay focused and be level-headed when faced with those distractions. So these are my two hard truths, like I guess here from an investor perspective.
I think that's completely true, Puiyan. I guess if I can illustrate it a little bit more vividly, it's primarily in facing a very nascent industry with still uncertain regulations. As a founder, you have to think of the big picture and why you're doing it, right? So, of course, it's very easy to give up when you face setbacks on things that you cannot control, such as regulation, right? If you go back to your why over and over again, you will find creative ways, right, on how you can still deliver the impact. And so I guess it really also forces me to really think about building this company in a non-linear way, with the hope that eventually things would fall together at the right place at the right time.
And Ria, you mentioned about impact. So I think beyond, the whole offsetting the carbon credits, what kind of economic or even social impact you would have on the farmers and other people that you're working with?
Increase in income by changing agriculture to more sustainable practice is definitely one area, but a bigger proportion of impact in the entire nature-based solutions discussion for climate action is actually how we can involve and engage communities to be the person who preserve the nature, who conserve the nature, right? So it's making them, for example, converting them from the one who's doing the logging to actually rewarding them and actually paying them, right, to do patrols and to do forest conservation or even build nurseries, right? So really giving them more economic opportunities in the entire regenerative economy.
Yeah, I really love how your system is going to incentivize people to be able to take care of the environment. You mentioned about how, building this in this nascent space is tough, but you have to keep going back to your why. And I want to ask you, has there been any memorable incident that actually helps to keep you going and help you to realize that you're on the right track?
Yeah. So the most vivid one was the last luncheon sessions that we had with over 60 mangrove organizations in Central Java. They said the crisis and COVID basically creates a lot of instability for these communities who rely on CSR funds to really do planting, right? Replanting of mangrove. Last year alone, there was a big flood that happened because the mangrove coast as a last defense was actually very, very thin. So for them, this is not a feel good project. For them, it's actually about survivability, right? About being adaptive and defensible to like extreme weathers and really weathering down the impact of floods in their area, right? So now I didn't understand why they're very excited when we meet them, right? Because the promise of carbon markets or a sustainable market to do this is basically it becomes a new economy that runs on its own, matching between supply and demand. So then such activity of planting mangrove is another business for them to earn livelihood, not just like a CSR program. So for me, that was one of the more eye-opening experience. So no matter how hard the regulation changes and anything, we do believe that this is something that is very important, and we're doing it for people who actually really need help and to actually survive.
So, Ria, I'm going to ask you a controversial question. So, you may have heard of somewhere in the past, because the country is full of mines, the government actually incentivized people to catch the mines, and then pay them for it in order to get rid of the problem. But what happened is that people start to grow mines in their house. So, I want to ask you: do you see incentivizing the growth of mangrove and other sustainable practices may actually create some kind of side effect?
I do think there needs to be a balance between giving a reward, instant reward, compared to a sustainable one. Because I hear also there are some projects that are just because they want to get a certain grants, right? They actually don't take care of the project longevity because they want to get another grant, right? But this is why I think the market solution is the right way, is because in market fixes itself, right? So market improves. So for example, they first know that, and I think this is what how carbon market has evolved in the US or Europe, where at first everybody just pouring and buying any types of credit, right? But then they know it becomes, they just buy junk credits, right? Carbon credits that comes from project that is very short term, it's not even there anymore, it's questionable. But now a lot of criticism actually improves the quality of the project where the money is being flowed to. So that's why I believe the solution for any problem needs to be returned to a market system. Of course there's needs to be regulation, but as much as possible leaving it towards supply and demand and allowing the feedback system to happen is the more sustainable way to create change and the more sustainable way to really incentivize and create a more lasting solutions to climate.
Yeah, cool. And I think it's a apt time to ask about what's the hard truth about being a mother, working, either investing or running your own company. You want to share something and an advice for future mothers and
Yeah,
entrepreneur?
I guess maybe the most pertinent one for me is that 24 hours in a day is just not enough. Like I don't know how I can describe it, but it sounds really cliche, but it's true, right? Between making sure I deliver at work and between making sure that I spend a quality time at home and getting everything in order, then the day is gone, right? So it means that I need to be very prudent about how I spend my time. And be very efficient in the way I function, whether at home or otherwise, right? Otherwise, then it's a missed opportunity to get something else done. And I think therefore I don't have the luxury of, let's just do this and that and randomly and let's just spontaneously do ABC. I think I'm sure I will have the opportunity again when maybe a couple of years have passed. But at the moment, I am laser focused in being very efficient in everything I do. Yeah, that's maybe the hard truth here.
I guess for me, the hard truth is like you can't have everything at the same time, and you definitely can't do it alone, right? So right now, again, juggling two kids, the company, being a wife as well, and still being a daughter to parents as well, right? With whatever expectations there are in this world, I guess you just need to be very you need to know why you choose to do the things that you want to do, right? Like what Puyan said, if you can only do two things in a day, right? Three things in a day, make sure that that choice is going to be the one that's most meaningful for you or for your kids, right? I guess that's also the entire reason why I even started Fairatmos at the first place, because I had my first child. I really want to show him that if you want to get something done, you better do it yourself. So then I left from advising role to be an operator. And with my second child, I started Fairatmos was also the realization that a problem that is tough needs someone solving, right? And if no one started doing that, you might as well be the first doing that, right? Because then there will be more solutions, more people who's going to be confident enough because they've seen you do it, right? So I guess this becomes the reason why I work and why I built Fairatmos. So then when I'm spending time at Fairatmos, it's not like I'm being more away from my kids, but hopefully it's making me closer to my kids. You just also have to ask for help. I'm very lucky that I get a very, very supportive partner, very supportive family to take care of the kids as well when I'm away. But on the times where I spent it, you really have to be there and make sure it's time worth spending. And I guess the last one is also about nothing in this world is easy. Everything is hard. Like being a housewife is hard. Being a working woman is hard. Being just a person going through their day is hard, right? So choose your heart, right? And
I
make
was
sure
going to
that,
say, choose your poisons.
yeah, choose your poison, right? Yeah. And just make sure that's the one that, worth your life upon.
True. And, someone has said that parenthood make us prioritize better. It makes us realize and think about how can we be a role model for our children. So now I'm going to switch track. I'm going to actually ask Puiyan, besides this area that we have invested in, what other areas would be interesting to invest in your perspective?
Yeah, so hopefully in 5 years' time, climate is no longer a genre by itself. It should be hopefully embedded in the philosophy of all companies, right? Like, 5 years ago, many startup come out and say that I'm an AI company, I'm a this company, I'm that company. But actually now machine learning, AI is embedded in many sort of tech companies, software tech companies. So it's no longer just a genre on its own. Hopefully climate in 3 to 5 years time and sustainability is sort of a concept that's embedded in every startup, right? But having said that, actually there are many areas I think that needs attention. So mobility is one of them. I used to work in Indonesia sort of, I think 10 years ago now. And when I visited 2 days ago, and the traffic is significantly better. Part of it is thanks to the innovation and the mobility space that has happened in the past 10 years, right? So, but there's still a lot to be done. And then, of course, there's agri, right? There is the supply chain part, there could be the input-output part. There are many things to solve, right, in agri. Then, of course, urbanization is actually not stopping, especially in our region. We're still actually not really urbanized, but we're getting more and more urbanized. And therefore, we use more aircon, we use more electricity. So the whole built environment is another aspect I think there could be some innovation on. And the list go on and on, right? There's industrial, there's manufacturing, there's, of course, a whole genre of renewable energy. And I think there's a lot to chew on, and there will bound to be, hopefully, good amount of innovations, whether it's business model innovation or technological advances that will come out from our part of the world, and then we'll be there to back them when it happens.
I really feel like we are at the beginning of a new era, and this is a good start. I think one question that I didn't manage to ask you, Ria, is how does FairAtmos make money? And what do you think is the secret sauce or the moat that you will eventually have?
The way we create a sustainable business out of Fairatmos is really to make it in line with the impact that we're delivering, right? We see Fairatmos as connecting two sides of the market, right? The developers and the demand of the companies. On the supply side, on the project developer side, we do some revenue or profit share model with the projects that we help to successfully certify the credit. So that's on the supply side. Meanwhile, on the demand side, we can really help the companies to discover high quality projects by charging like typical marketplace platform fee on any of the offsets that is going to be incurred in our platform, at least.
Got it. Very clear. So since I mentioned that we are honoring International Women's Day with this podcast, I would like to invite both of you as well to give pieces of advice for female founders or people who aspire to be one.
It is actually well reported that women somehow apply for 20% fewer jobs than men, despite similar job search criteria or qualifications. It's also well reported that female professionals apply for jobs only if they feel that they're 100% qualified. But I think when you are in an innovation space, you are actually creating the opportunity yourself. So if you have an inclination there's a problem to be solved, be like Ria, right? Like if no one else is solving the problem, take the leap of faith and not wait for all the stars to be aligned to take the first step, right? That is, to be honest, really easier said than done, even for myself in my own area of work. But be sort of that catalyst, if you may, for the change that you want to see. And always lean on mentors, formal and informal. Speak to as many people as possible and triangulate what is the best path forward for you, for yourself, and iterate quickly and find the right like-minded people to support you, whether it's investors or partners and clients. But I have, in general, a lot of respect for any founders, male or female, because it really takes a lot to be a leader and to take something from nothing to a potential unicorn status. It takes a lot out of yourself. There will be moments of self-doubt. People will throw all sorts of nonsense at you, and it really takes a lot of grit, a lot of optimism, and maybe a sense of humor sometimes to sort of pull it through. So I salute all founders, male and female. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very true. I think entrepreneurship really pushes you to your limits. And these days, we talk a lot about mental health as well, because it takes so much grit. It takes so much for you to be always on top of your game. It's important to have support network. I think that it's time that we kind of remove that stigma, because we do need that kind of mental exercise, or even just conversation with somebody who is specialized to hear us out and find out, what other areas do we want to optimize as, even humans, big like as normal humans. So, so going back to you, Ria, what advice would you like to share?
Maybe I'll share a little bit of my personal journey when I'm just started working and really discovering my place in this whole world, right? I guess I was always in a state of telling myself that I'm not very good at things. Like, for example, when I just graduated, I don't think I'm good at math, and then so I shy away for anything that has math in it, right? And then I don't think I'm very good in like talking to people, or like I don't think I'm the best person to negotiate things or something like that. That kind of limitation really puts you in a box, and make you feel like you only belong in one place, right? That is very small, that you can only do one thing. But I guess the biggest realization that makes me break that, actually having a very strong circle of friends and trust, and in this case actually it's my husband, who believe that you can do many things, and allowing yourself to try and see if you can do it, right? So I guess through my journey at when I was pursuing my MBA, I tried, the most math related job that I could get, which is actually joining a private equity. I also actually tried working with a very early stage startup at that time, right? Really thinking, I have always been an advisor. Can I actually really operate, really breaking that barriers and boundaries that you put in yourself, that you said that you are inadequate. When you are the one who's limiting yourself, you basically can't, even do anything. But when you are already telling yourself that dream big, the opportunities and the possibilities is actually infinite, right? And you are here basically to become a channel of change and a channel of impact, right?
I love that you mentioned about not setting limits, because as females and being in Asia, I think there are lots of limits that we actually subconsciously or even consciously put on ourselves. Yeah, and you also mentioned about how you actually question your own negative thinking. And sometimes you just have to do that. Like when we think about we are bad at something, then measure it, because in life it all is relative. So if you are bad, and actually how bad are you? And if you think of the other ways, actually how good are you? Where are you on the whole scheme of things, the normal curve? And then my last question to you is actually, I want to hear about, how has been your childhood? What was it like growing up? Because I think it has a lot to do with how it shaped you as a person.
It definitely did a lot to who I am today. I am the third child out of four siblings, and I grew up in a family that is very, very patriarchy. And there, in our culture, men gets to do everything. So then I grew up in a mode of really proving I can do things as well, right? Like for instance, like choices about what school you go to. Do you go abroad or do you stay here? The family thought, women should stay closer to the family. That's why, you don't get opportunities or less opportunities to study abroad. So these kind of instances built me, in a mindset that one, I can prove myself, or I need to prove myself, but two, also give me the mindset of nothing to lose. Because when you push further, worst case, you'll fall back where you were supposed to be, right? So I guess that goes a long way into shaping myself. That is really, wanting to push boundaries, testing a lot of things, also asking why things are the way they are. And I'm just very lucky. This kind of, upbringing actually shapes me to be really upfront with problems and really wanting to test and discover new things. So I'm actually very glad.
Yeah, it's cool. You sound like someone who is very optimistic and someone who is really not afraid to challenge the boundaries. And I know that all these are ingredients made to be a great founder. I would like to ask Puiyan as well to share where she came from and how did it shape her, and maybe some kind of hard truth or advice for female in general. It didn't have to be female founders.
My background is quite different. I'm the only child, and I grew up in a very humble working class family, right? My parents, though, gave me what they could. They made a very bold decision to move from Hong Kong to Singapore to give me a better life. I think that was a life-changing decision for me. It's a typical, I suppose, immigrant story. I have gone through the Singapore education system. It equalized a lot of things because over here, if you do well, it doesn't really matter what background you come from, you have equal opportunity. And I think looking back, it's really credits to my parents who have made that bold move because they could stand to lose everything. By the time they're already not young and they really don't have anything else except optimism and hope, right? But I guess also what shaped me would be my current family support system, obviously including my husband. I was posted overseas for a while in my previous role. In my current role, sometimes I travel, but regardless, the intensity varies, right? So, but I do know that whenever I am not going to be around, I know that things are taken care of. So I feel very, very fortunate. I think maybe what I would hope is that to be able to show my two sons that actually, men and women have equal role to play at home and professionally. I want to show that despite whatever background you come from, you can get equal opportunity if you do well and you have the right attitude. I feel very blessed to be given all the opportunities so far professionally.
I feel very encouraged by what both of you have shared. So thank you so much. I really enjoy our conversation. So thank you so much, Ria and Puiyan.